Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Fountain of Life podcast. For the past couple of episodes, we have been looking at how to find the next steps, even as we go through difficult life changes. Changes of any kind, whether we consider it positive, like child in the family or new marriage, or changes that we may consider not too positive, like death, divorce, or loss of a job or loss of a loved one, can all have impact on our lives and becomes a source of trauma, or sometimes causes to be unsettled and disoriented in a lot of ways. So navigating any change of any kind can be very difficult. But the question is, if you're a person of faith, how does your faith help you? How does your relationship with God help you to navigate life's difficult changes? Because whichever way we look at it, change happens. But change can be very unsettling and disorienting, whether it's in the positive or it's in the negative. But we can always find help through God. Why don't you join me in the next minutes as we look at dealing with difficult life changes?
Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. I worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. I worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. Worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of life.
This is your host, Charles Zuta, and I welcome you again to today's episode. So change happens, and change can be very difficult and challenging to navigate. But how does our faith help us and guide us even as we navigate those changes? And I've been focusing narrowly in the past two episodes on painful, difficult changes that happens to us all as believers. And how does our faith play in all of this? Sometimes it's easy to maybe blame ourselves, or maybe I don't pray enough, or maybe, find some other reasons why these things happen. But most often we don't understand because we live in an evil world. So the issue at stake is not to find fault or find blame. Yes, there are lessons that we can learn when we go through those difficult changes. But the emphasis here in these episodes is to address the question, where do I go from here? Now that I'm sitting in this difficult change that is going on around me, maybe I've just lost my marriage, or maybe there's, lost my job, as this is the season of so much change in this country that we live in, the US. So as change happens all around us, how do we navigate that? We've been looking in the past two episodes, we have been looking at John chapter 21, as the disciples navigated a very difficult change moment in their lives. Jesus, with whom they've built a life maybe for 3.5 years, suddenly died. He's resurrected. He's appeared sporadically to them. But then the bigger question that they were facing, where do we go from here? And one of the things that we talked about in our previous episode is that even in those moments of change, there are things that we can do to help ourselves. From human perspective, if you happen to use the therapists and all the people who may try to help us using the tools that are available to us medically and all, they may tell you, be active, don't lock yourself in a room, practice self-care, self-love, engage with your friends and all of those things. Those are all very, very good. And we saw an example of that in Peter's decision in John chapter 21, where after all the trauma and everything that he had experienced, denying Jesus and not knowing which way, the next steps that he has to take, Peter decides, I'm going fishing. And I said in last week's episode that is part of the self-care, the self-love, being active, trying to do something in that difficult moment that he was trying to navigate. So even in biblical language or in biblical terms, we find these same truths that maybe a therapist will tell you to do. So if you're a person of faith, you have the opportunity to make use of maybe both the secular things that are offered as well as the scriptural pieces, because we see Peter here. He has friends with him. So he didn't isolate himself, and then organize a pity party or something like that. But he has his friends with him. He said, I'm going fishing. And they all went with him. Okay. But a bigger question is, where is God in all of this? So in today's episode, we want to spend some time to understand how our faith connects with us and how we can use our faith to be able to navigate those difficult moments in life. So let us go back to John chapter 21, where we see the disciples try to help themselves or try to do something to improve the circumstance that they find themselves in. And then see how God came into their world in those dark moments where everything seems like it's dark and gloom and they really don't know what to do. So we'll pick up the story in John chapter 21, reading from the verse, let's start from the verse 3. It says, they said to him, we are going with you. That the disciples told Peter when he said, I'm going fishing. They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. This is the beginning of how God comes in those difficult moments of our lives. He uses familiar language with us. See, if you recall, at the calling of Peter at the beginning 3 years back, Peter had such an experience. As fisherman, he and his fishing mates went out fishing, and the whole night they caught nothing. So when this event happens, Peter must be a very seasoned fisherman. And so this is a very interesting starting point. The whole night they caught nothing. So in that first encounter with Jesus, they caught nothing. And Jesus said, you know what? Give me your boat. Let me use your boat to minister to people. And after he finished ministering, he told them, go back into the sea and let down your net. And they said, look, we tried the whole night. We've caught nothing. But because of your words, we will go back and do it again. And when they went back and they let down their nets on the right side of the boat, they caught so much fish, their boat was almost sinking. Peter had to call his partners, James and John, the other ones, to come and help. And even then, those two boats couldn't contain all the fish. And when he came to the shore, he was so bamboozled by what he had seen. He told Jesus, just get away from me, I'm an unclean person. The miracle was so overwhelming for Peter. And Jesus told him, from now on, just follow me. From now on, I'll make you fishers of men. And that was his calling. So in this dark moment, when they were going through this difficult change in their lives, God spoke. He came into the circumstances. He came in around them, speaking the same language, a familiar language, using the same signs. So sometimes when we go through difficult life circumstances and we are looking for God, one of the things that we could do is to remember where our relationship with God all began. There have been things that have gone on in your life, even before this difficult change you're going through, that points to the finger of God, that goodness, this has to be God. This has to be God moments in our lives are God's signboards for us, that when we go through those challenges, we need to lift up our eyes and look at those signposts. They should remind us that He hasn't given up on us. So that night, they caught nothing. And that is the fingerprint of God to get their attention that, hey, dude, I'm here with you. Verse 4. But when morning had come, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples didn't know that it was Jesus. Then Jesus said to them, children, have you any food? Why would they not know that that was Jesus? We don't know how long He had been standing on the shore. But when morning came, they saw Him. And then when they saw Him, they didn't know that it was Jesus. You see, when we go through those difficult life changes, whatever form it has taken, maybe we are traumatized, or maybe it's leading us to a dark place. We're getting depressed. We prayed, we tried, and everything is not working. And when we look out, it's just, a lot of pain. God hasn't abandoned our side. But it's just that we can't see Him. That's the problem. We just can't see God. Maybe our eyes are so much full of tears, we just can't see clearly. The pain virtually overwhelms us. So really, in those dark, difficult moments, when we're going through those difficult changes, whether it's a change perhaps that even comes through a happy event, like you just got promoted, but you are just overwhelmed with the magnitude of the work, and you feel, oh God, what have I done? Even in those moments, the God who led you into that process, He is there with you. And you should be able to see Him. So here we find the disciples at the shore. In the sea, and Jesus standing at the shore. How long He'd been standing there, we don't know. Remember, they didn't invite Him. That is, even if they knew where to find Him. Because in these post-resurrection days, nobody knows where He's going to show up. So there wasn't a planned agenda. But God knew their situation. He knew where Peter was. He had a plan, an agenda for Peter's life. And fishing wasn't really one of them. So here we find Jesus coming to the disciples. And that is what it looks like with God. He comes to us in those dark moments. So if you are wondering, where is God in all of this? He's right there. By the shore. Maybe you just haven't seen Him yet. So, He speaks up first. And I like that about God. When He comes to us, He watches us. He stays with us. And He talks to us. I don't know how good the acoustics are in that part of the world with the waves and the seas and everything, but they heard Jesus. And He asked them a simple question. He said, children, have you any food? This is very fascinating. You see, the disciples had fished the whole night and perhaps very exhausted. Morning had come. So naturally, they will be hungry. You see, they will be hungry. And He calls them children. He didn't call them disciples. He called them children. Children are dependent on their parents. If you have a baby and it's crying, that baby is totally dependent on nourishment from you. If you have children, they are totally dependent. That is why society frowns when children are forced to end their keep, because it doesn't sound right and it doesn't look good. So society condemns child labor and things like that. Children should be provided for. They should be cared for. They should be protected. So in much the same way, God was viewing these grown men as children, because he takes a sense of responsibility towards them. He didn't call them disciples. He called them children. And that speaks to the heart of God in those moments of our anguish, in those dark, difficult moments. So if you are wondering, where do I go from here? What are my next steps? These are challenging moments. God, where are you? I have good news for you. He is standing by your side. He's speaking to you. Maybe you just don't recognize him. You just don't see him through the darkness of your pain. But the truth is, he's right there with you. He comes to us in those moments. He comes to us. So he came to them in those moments of pain, of anguish and all, and he called them children. If there's one consolation that you should take, remember, you are not alone. So your relationship with God guarantees that he come to you because of Jesus Christ, because of the price that he had paid. You are an investment. You think Jesus is going to abandon Peter? No way. He's invested too much in the disciples to just walk away from them. In much the same way, in your moments of difficulty, remember the price that he paid to buy you to himself. That is a seal of ownership. And because of that, he will come running to your side. So when things have gone rough and the pain is overwhelming and you are confused and disoriented, one of the things that can help you to find your next steps is to unclench your fist and take the hand of God. Let us make a quick detour to the book of Revelations, and I will come back to John chapter 21 as we look at how our relationship with God helps us to navigate difficult life changes and also helps us to find our next steps when we don't know where we are going from here. In Revelation chapter 3, usually we quote this scripture when we are witnessing and we are letting the world know about God's love for them and all of that. But remember, this was written to a church. So it is God talking to his people. Revelation 3 verse 20, the Bible says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him and he with me." There's more to say about this, but let's quickly hustle our way back to the book of John chapter 21, and I'll continue the conversation from there. So here we find Jesus speaking to the disciples, and he literally asked them, "Do you have any food? Do you have any food?" What is his idea? What exactly is he driving at? Of course, food means eating, right? And we see over here in Revelation chapter 3 verse 21, he says, "If anyone hears my voice, I'm standing at the door and I'm knocking. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in, dine with him and he with me." So when he asked them, "Children, do you have any food?" his objective is to fellowship with them, to dine with them, to share himself with them, to be partaker of their moment of need, to be there with them. And remember, he's not asking them come for a prayer meeting. He's not asking them, "Hey, let's go, I will empower you to go out, and then change the world and cast out demons and all that." He's relating to them on the human level. Food. Not spiritual food, physical food. So sometimes we think God doesn't care about maybe our emotional needs, our physical needs. He doesn't care. No. All he cares about is we making it to heaven. That is not God. God cares for us to do well in life, in every dimension of our lives, spirit, soul, and body. So when he came to them in this difficult moment, he didn't come preaching, and neither did he come rebuking them. He called them children. Remember, Peter went out to help himself, to do something for himself. But God has a much grander plan for his life. But the doorway into that grander plan was through the human level. So maybe you are looking for some amazing sign in the skies, to see that God is there with you. No, it is the little things. The fact that you could wake up and feel a new sense of joy. The fact that you could wake up and appreciate the sunshine. The fact that you could wake up, that in spite of all this, you feel a little thrill in your heart. That is the doorway through which God comes in to bring that change, that bigger change that you want. So don't discount those small steps of progress that you are making even as you are navigating these difficult changes. He came to them talking about food. That is who our God is. He cares about us. Then if you come down, so they said no, and he didn't say anything again. Verse 6, he said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of the fish. Therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. How did John, the beloved disciple, notice that this is the Lord? Because he remembered, or maybe Peter might have told him about how the whole night he had told him caught nothing, and Jesus told him to cast their boat, the net on the right side, and they caught so much fish. How come John remembered this and could connect with God, but Peter didn't? You see, sometimes in the midst of our grief, in the midst of our pain, we may not recognize the hand of God. It wasn't Peter who said it is the Lord, even though what was happening were things that he had experienced. That was the foundation on which he got called into the ministry. But when Jesus came singing the same song, saying the same words, playing the same tune to him, he couldn't recognize Jesus. We don't know why. Maybe he was too traumatized to even feel the hand of God. So what happens to us in those difficult moments is that we let the Lord stand outside and keep knocking. We don't recognize his voice, and we don't open the door either. He's a perfect gentleman. He's not going to come into our lives and force the door open. Rather, he will knock. And when he knocks, we have to do the opening. There are certain doors in our lives that only we can open. And that is the same when you're going through a difficult life change. You need to be able to look at God and say, you know what, Lord? I accept this moment. Just come in, Lord, into this difficult moment and continue to do your work in my life. You need to open that door to him. He's not going to force his way in. And that is so important for us to recognize, that we need to open that door. So when you are traumatized with that difficult change and you really don't know where the next steps are going to be, I have this first step for you as a person of faith. Be prepared to unclench your fist, open the door, and let God come in. He's been standing there and knocking. Don't push him away. Don't let the devil accuse God to you and cause you to run away from God and run away from church or blame God for everything that has happened. Rather, he comes to your side. So one of the first steps that you can do is to rediscover your faith. Go back to church. Go back to your Christian friends. Go back to the Bible. Because that is where God is going to communicate with you. He comes, he recognizes that you are human. But when he comes in, he gives you two levels of interaction. He says, I will dine with him, he will dine with me. Two things. God will, in the next episode, we shall dive deeper into this relationship that he has with us. He dining with us, we dining with him. That is what he did with the disciples. We shall pick it up from here, God willing, next week. But let's all remember, God comes to us in those dark moments, and he stands at the door and he knocks, and he says, just open the door, I will come in. But let's not keep him out there. Let us see him. Just like John saw Jesus when he recognized the handiwork of God in their difficult moment. Peter couldn't. It took John to say it for Peter to recognize that it's the Lord. But he'd been standing there all morning. Thank you for joining me today, and God willing, we shall continue from this point to look at how we can navigate difficult life changes as we ask the question, how do I find my next steps? Thank you, and God richly bless you. Oh, and by the way, if you don't subscribe to this podcast, I encourage you to do so. Hit the subscribe button, send us your comments, and also share the link with your friends if this ministry is a blessing to you. Above all, you can also download this audio podcast on Amazon, Spotify, Google, and all the places where you got your podcast. And you can listen to them over and over again. May God richly bless you. See you again at the next episode. Thank you.
Fountain of my life, I worship you today. Lord, only you are. Yes, Lord. You restore my soul. I worship you today.
The book of Matthew 11:28-29. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest